we played a clip earlier of Stephen A. Smith and his Whitlock takeout saying, ask Dan Le Batard, go ahead and ask Jemele Hill about Jason Whitlock. So we've asked Dan Le Batard, and he's been reserved. So we're going to try our hand at asking Jemele Hill.
Okay, and we will ask Jemele Hill about what I believe to be the most important story of the day, which is Lucy's intense hatred for Michigan fans. Because, oh wow, Jemele agrees with that one totally. Lucy says
they're the worst.
Lucy says
I can relate.
They're the worst, Jemele? Michigan fans are the worst? I thought all fan bases, any fan base that's caught up in the identity politics of being a regional sports team that wants to be believed in nationally, I thought all fan bases are kind of obnoxious that way.
Yeah, all fan bases have a different levels of being obnoxious. I mean, I don't know if Michigan would be my number one, but they would probably be in my top 5. And I think this year, if we were just doing it based purely off this college football season, they would by far be the most obnoxious fan base, because with all of the speculation about whether or not they stole signs and cheated, they turned themselves into victims so badly. Like this whole Michigan versus everybody, like all of these wounds were self-inflicted. Like so it's just not rational talking. I mean, no fan base is really rational, but it was the martyrdom. It was the victimhood. It was them riding that nobody believed in us train that is so annoying. And they were at their worst this season. And so I was hoping that they would be, I was hoping that they wouldn't make it this far. I knew they had a very good team. So I certainly don't want to make it seem like their team wasn't worthy or what they accomplished or anything like that. But hearing them constantly over and over again talk about how they were targeted and, just that whole thing with the cheating, they were the most obnoxious fan base in college football this season, and I don't think anybody else comes close.
I believe that this is the happiest I've ever seen Roy Bellamy, and I think it's not even because of the Panthers. Look at how joyous he is. It's simply because Whitlock is getting dragged today, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Is he? Because I tried asking Jemele Hill, and we talked about Michigan. Can we talk about the Whitlock thing, please?
More stories.
Jemele, Stephen A. Smith told me in that clip to ask you about Jason Whitlock. I am asking you about Jason Whitlock.
Okay. Well, I will say that what Stephen A. said is correct, is that when the undefeated started, Jason and I have a history, and I just realized it's been a really long time since I've said his name. And so maybe from this point forward, I just won't say it.
Or you can call him a fat bastard.
I won't go there. I'll leave that to Stephen A. And by the way, just a quick point about the rant is that it is, even though in real life, like off air, I've heard Stephen A. curse just in conversation. He sounds so awkward cursing on broadcast. Maybe because he's not used to doing it, but I needed him to put a little stank on it. You know what I'm saying? Like he it sounded like he hadn't cursed in a long time. It sort of reminded me of when you sort of learn your teacher's first name and you're like, oh my God, you're not Miss Johnson, you're Loretta. What is this? So
I love no holds barred, Stephen A. I love outside the corporate machine, Stephen A. saying whatever the hell he wants, all powerful.
I'm here for the rankings of women. I'm here for him talking about the body parts he likes. I'm here for this liberated Stephen A. But it still feels weird to hear him curse, and I just I needed it to sound a little less awkward. But that being said, to answer Mike's question, is that Stephen A. was correct. When the undefeated started, he reached out to a bunch of us to see if we wanted to work, with the undefeated. He and I have a particular, we were at one point, I would have considered us to be friends, and that dissolved for a number of reasons. Some of which I don't necessarily feel like I want to dig up the bones on, but only to a certain degree to make my point. But by that time, we were not even, wouldn't even acknowledge each other probably in the same room on that level. And he reached out to me. He apologized and said that it was a bad look to have two Black people in our position to be beefing. And that he would like me to do some work with the undefeated. Now, I thought that it was such a terrible idea for Skipper and to hire him to do this. I don't know why he did. And I told Skipper that. I mean, I told him that at the time that, like, this was not.
We've learned it's Dan's fault, Jemele. We've learned today
no.
it's Dan's
wait,
fault.
Wait. I found that out later, and I almost started to be like, Dan, like,
us
dude,
too.
what would make you think this was a good idea?
God damn it, Dan.
This is what happened, Jemele. This is what happened. It wasn't just me. It was me and Simmons, right? It's Whitlock.
I know. I heard that too.
And Bill Simmons.
Yeah, Whitlock asked us to make a call vouching for him as a journalist, and we did. And I made not the joke, but I just said earlier in the show, how's that for privilege? How does the black guy get power? It's the black guy who's against all the other black people, chosen by the two white guys and the Cuban guy.
That is my main question to you, Dan. Did you ask any black people about like?
I did well, but Jemele, I was vouching for him as a columnist. You know, he was a good sports columnist.
Well, I didn't want to totally derail this conversation, Dan, but I did notice you were dressed rather strangely. But I'm not here to judge. Well, if this is how you felt this morning that you wanted to dress, then here it is.
What did you think? Because this is so interesting, everything that's happening at the top of sports media right now, Jemele, because you've seen the culture wars are coming and to sports media power. And Sage Steele has weighed in on how disappointing it was to see Stephen A. Smith go after Jason Whitlock so unprofessionally. So what do I do with that?
Well, if there was one person who would come to his defense, I think that's probably the correct person. If you asked me to take 5 guesses, all 5 of them would have probably been her. I think people have something mistaken, though, about all of this. And there is a long list of things that he has done. It's a long list that, especially by people in this industry who you respect, like Stuart Scott. Let's just take him, for example. Jason Whitlock wrote some pretty awful things about Stuart Scott. And then to try to come back and act like he didn't write those things, it was very disingenuous. He wrote some very awful things about another friend of mine, Scoop Jackson, a person that I hold near and dear, to my heart. And it's one thing to critique people. It's another thing to take the kind of shots that he tends to take at people that are very personal, that are rooted in what seems to be a lot of jealousy, that it is just, it's very distasteful. So he has been opening and airing people out for a long time. And what happens is what you saw with Stephen A. Smith. I think he just got tired of it. We've all had our turn where Whitlock has decided to make us a target. And I can tell when that happens because my mentions look a certain way whenever he decides to bring my name up. And I tend to ignore it just because I know that is what he wants, is that he would like for somebody to respond to him and to kind of keep this going and get his name out there, even though it's not for the most positive attention. And so I try very hard not to give into it, but it gets tiresome and bothersome and irritating after a while when somebody is constantly talking about you that you don't give a fuck about. And I think that Stephen A., because me knowing this, just having, written my memoir less than, it came out, about 2 years ago, it's something very personal to you. It's something that you pour a lot of time and effort in. And as he said, he wrote it himself. And I think the last straw for him seemed to be him attacking his credibility, him attacking the truthfulness in his memoir. And so, he went in and, what he said was correct. Like a bunch of us, when he got hired to run the Undefeated, did not want to work with him. When he emailed me and asked me to work with him and sort of said like, hey, we need to bury whatever is between us, I wished him well and said, no, thank you. All right. And, I never disparaged anybody for working with him for the brief time that he was there. I mean, if that's what they chose to do. I believed in the thesis behind the Undefeated. I believed in the philosophy of it and what it was trying to accomplish. And I was hoping that it would not be the outcome that it eventually became. It was not surprising to me that was the case, because I knew that he just did not have, frankly, the credibility in our community, and certainly not among writers. I mean, he spent years ripping the National Association of Black Journalists, and Black journalists are supposed to come working for him. No, that's just it was an impossible task, kind of to begin with. And so what Stephen A., how he responded, I think is just, frankly, just him having reached his limit of like, I just can't take this anymore. Let me just drop something and put it to an ether beat and be about my way.
Well, let me ask you this, though, because in the present media economy, as we shout into our echo chamber and he shouts into his, is this a win for Jason Whitlock that Stephen A. Smith is doing this? Because this is certain, if the intent is to be professional asshole who speaks to white conservatives as the black guy willing to espouse anti-black opinions, does he win today?
I guess you could argue on some level, yes, because there's a bunch. After I verified what Stephen A. claimed, to say, yes, he is correct. We did not want to work with him. And oh, by the way, that just a really quick story as a tangent to that. It was funny because I think the first year he may have been there with the Undefeated, they were doing a Black History Month special, and they asked me to be on it, and he was going to be a panelist as well as Michael Wilbon. And I told them no about 5 or 6 times. The only time Skipper has made me do something was appear on that Black History Month special, because I was like, I won't be on TV with him. Like, I'm just not doing that. But they made it very easy for me. They made sure we were not in the same segment. They made sure we were not in the same segment. So like, we never ever saw each other physically on camera. And so next time I see Skipper, I'm gonna remind him of that. The only time he has ever said you have to do this is making me appear in a program with Jason Whitlock. So I feel like Skipper still owes me for that one.
Well, what are the odds? What are the odds, do you think? I used Skipper's telephone number once the entire time I worked there. And it's because Jason Whitlock asked me to vouch for him. What are the odds of that? And whatever it was, 8 or 9 months later, Whitlock called me in tears because it had all fallen apart and Skipper had to fire him very, very quickly. Because I'm surprised there wasn't more of an uprising immediately that made that known, so that would be cut short, earlier than 9 months. Do you believe that in sports media he's the most disliked person that there is among other journalists?
I mean, he's in the top 5. And by the way, Dan, I feel like you owe us some reparations for that.
I do.
So you do. So
well, you're a Meadowlark advisor now. You're a Meadowlark advisor. True. That comes. I'm gonna start putting reparations in wherever it is that in the notes. In the notes.
Thanks, Dan.
Correct. Yes. Whenever there's an invoice, I want to see reparations on there. Okay, that's what I want to see. I want to see you write that on there. I will say this, and this is, I think this gets to something larger here. The reason none of this came out necessarily, I mean, I know there was a Deadspin article that was written about his tumultuous reign there and what was happening, but I can say, like, internally, like, we might have had, like, some Black folks at ESPN at the time, we may have had conversations with each other, but I think unofficially, we had all decided to kind of stand down. We didn't want to work with you, but we're not going to sabotage your time while you're there. And that was because I think we all understood the larger mission of making sure the Undefeated was a success. And at the end of the day, it was going to be a platform and an opportunity for a lot of Black columnists, writers, people who deserve their work to be seen. And I don't think we wanted to sabotage that, despite our dislike for the person who was running it. Now, I'll say this, is that when it comes to, is he the most hated? I think he's up there. And certainly if you want to take it to a Black journalism circle, a sports Black journalism circle, I mean, I think he's number one, and there's really no one else that's even coming for that crown. And a lot of it is because we remember when he was a very good columnist, that he was one of the best writers and best columnists in America. And to see him evolve into this is such a crazy, psychotic heel turn that I think none of us ever saw coming. And even when he was at his best, and he would sometimes write things that I thought were a little distasteful, they were more forgivable because we thought he was being genuine. And now seeing this complete turn into whatever this is, we know that so much of his life and his behavior was just a complete act. So I can accept somebody who has, varying and different beliefs than I do. That's like not a problem. What is a problem to me is when I know you're switching because you're trying to get a check. And it's like, I can't respect that. I have no respect for that whatsoever.
Jemele, good talking to you as always. Thank you for the time and the insight.
All right. Think about your reparations, Dan.
More? You want more. You want more.
I'm just saying.
Now that this is known.